This is Ms. Cooper here. Want to give you commentary and information regarding your documents for Chapter 8. We are moving along in the World History class. Our Chapter 8 objective still deals with the ideas of the Industrial Revolution, and we're still analyzing the emergence and expansion of that revolution and looking at the geographic, the economic, the social, and the political implications that resulted from it. Some of the things that resulted from industrialization include imperialism. Imperialism is that idea that you should go outside of your natural borders and acquire territory or take over, however you want to phrase it. Nonetheless, that has not been met very well by some. For example, the Chinese were not open to trading with the British, and we had the Opium Wars. That ended up with Hong Kong being ceded to Great Britain, or given to them to pretty much operate and sell their products however they wanted to. And they were able to do that all the way up until 1997. So that's a very long time. Other issues include the fall of the shogunates. The Meiji Restoration is the last thing that was mentioned in Chapter 7. And it basically, in the videos that I presented to you, it explained the breakdown of Japanese history and them being ruled by the sword, the power of the shoguns, and the daimyo and the samurai soldiers. Their whole situation just got turned upside down when Western influences came, and that created tension in the region. So as we look at how industrialization gives people reasons to want to go and sell more products and find new markets to sell more products so they can make more money, we can see how nationalist movements began to pop up all over the globe. Okay, we had China that had the Boxer Rebellion, we had the Taiping Rebellion. In Japan, we had this sense of Bushido. The code of Bushido meant to maintain your honor regardless, and they would cut your head off for anything. And they went into this severe warrior mode because they were understanding that the European forces and influences were coming. And in most cases, they were coming to conquer, and build empires. At the same time, Japan wants to build an empire. So it goes in and it starts to take things from China or argue about things in the Asian region, in the Far East. They're arguing about who should get Korea. They're arguing about places like Manchuria. They're arguing about areas that are in the Pacific Ocean, such as the Philippines and other places in that area. So that's what our objective is for Chapter 8. And as we're looking at all of these things and how they connect, the biggest thing that Chapter 8 brings to us is World War I. Yes, a major conflict dating from around 1914 till about 1919. Several parties involved, several reasons for fighting, and a few losers, a few winners. A treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, is the most important thing that comes out of World War I. And the Treaty of Versailles does cause problems. It causes people to get upset, the people who do not think they received enough, or the people who think that they were dealt with too harshly. So I'm going to start with there are two documents you're going to receive this week. There is this document, your visual study guide, and then this is what your Chapter 8 notes will look like this week. It's a document. It's not as long as the Ottoman Empire document, but it is pretty lengthy. So I will provide that for you so that you can follow the instructions and take the proper notes. So in this video, I'm going to basically just summarize this first document to be sure that you're clear on every aspect of this chapter in advance as we move through it, watching videos and taking notes and discussing these elements. So nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and alliances. The video you watched called that MAIN, M-A-I-N, okay? The M was for the militarism, the A is for the alliances, the I is for imperialism, and the N is for nationalism. So again, the system of nation states led to competition as each state was guided by self-interests, and most leaders saw war as an acceptable way to preserve power. So people thought that it was okay to fight. That's how you show that you're strong. You should fight. You should show how many guns you have. Let people know that they should be afraid of you. This is what they thought. That's a component of nationalism. Build your nation up. Make your nation look strong. Imperialism. The competition for lands abroad, especially in Africa, led to conflict and heightened the existing rivalries among European states. So because we're going out here and getting people's stuff, this is exactly what creates more rivalry and competition. Militarism. Most Western countries had a military draft called conscription. That's definitely going to be on your test. Conscription. It means to be drafted. You didn't ask, you didn't join, you didn't volunteer. You were drafted into the armed services. Before 1914, there was conscription. Okay, armies were growing, as was the influence of military leaders. Conscription comes back. We'll see it again. These alliances, Europe's great powers had been divided into two loose political alliances. You had Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. They formed a triple alliance in 1882. And then you had France, Britain, and Russia. They created the Triple Entente. That's how you pronounce that, Entente, not Entente, Entente. They formed that in 1907. Now, in Lesson 2, it talks about different ways that people are approaching war. The Western Front, you have the Germans and the French. They become stuck in trench warfare. So Germany and France are already having issues, okay, prior to World War I starting. When neither could dislodge each other from the trenches they had dug for shelter. As they're into the thick of this particular war, and trench warfare becomes the popular way to proceed, it starts to look like a stalemate. Okay, there was already bad blood, okay, floating around between these different countries because of imperialist rivalry. Now here we are face to face, and the style of warfare is more complicated. This trench warfare, we'll watch something about that. The Eastern Front had more movement, and it resulted in the Germans defeating the Russians, which allowed them to move back to the offensive in the West. So this is who you had. You had the Germans and the French, who were kind of close enough to be, fighting this trench warfare, but not really making any headway. But then you have the Germans defeating the Russians and gives them an advantage on the East. But meanwhile, in Russia, there's a whole civil war breaking out. So moving into Lesson 3, where it talks about the factors that helped the communists win. The communists won the Russian Civil War. And it was very similar to the Chinese Civil War, where you had corruption. You had a non-communist group under Chiang Kai-shek and the Kuomintang that were non-communist but very corrupt, and the people didn't like them. And so next thing you know, here comes Mao Zedong and the whole nation's communist, and the 5-year plans and the Great Leap Forward and death and destruction. It was a lot of bad things. So Russia goes through a civil war in a similar fashion. You had a Red Army, well-disciplined. They were soldiers, the Red Army. The anti-communist forces suffered from a lack of unity. The people who were not communists, they were always arguing. Then you had the presence of foreign armies on Russian soil, allowing the communists to appeal to the force of Russian patriotism. So, you had these people saying, hey, these folk aren't from here, but we're from here. And I know we're communists, but we're from here, and we're your friends, and we should not let them be here. See how people can play mind games? The war communism policy ensured regular supplies for the Red Army, okay? So we had just some things in place that were making it possible for the Russian Communist Party to win in that situation. Then you had something called the Cheka, a secret police, that they began the Red Terror that inspired fear in those who opposed the new regime. So if you didn't agree with the Communist Party, they were coming to kill you. They were coming to try to threaten you and make you think that they were going to kill you. So very negative. Then the last one, and I'm going to close this video, the Treaty of Versailles. This is the last lesson in this particular chapter, and then I'm going to move to the next document in your next commentary video. So the final peace settlement of Paris consisted of 5 separate treaties with defeated nations. The Treaty of Versailles with Germany was by far the most important. So there were 4 others, but the Treaty of Versailles is the most important. The Germans were unhappy with several parts of the settlement, but they accepted the treaty. Firstly, the so-called war guilt clause declared that Germany and Austria were responsible for starting the war. It required that Germany pay financial compensation for the damages. Germany had to reduce its army. Certain areas, Alsace and Lorraine, were taken by the Germans from France. In 1871, they were returned. Okay, Germany had taken Alsace and Lorraine from France in 1871. France gets to get them back. Sections of Eastern Germany were awarded to a new Polish state. Poland becomes a whole state. German land along the Rhine River becomes a demilitarized zone, stripped of all weapons and fortifications. So now you're out there vulnerable. If somebody wants to come and blow you up, you just are out there. So this is exactly what parts of the Treaty of Versailles that Germany was not happy with. And this is why we have a World War II, because Germany specifically was not happy with this treaty. So that's your commentary video for your document 1, your visual study guide. Keep watching the videos. Keep taking your notes. Thanks for being here.